Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff, presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Mike McCarthy is the producer behind the boards, and Week 10 in the FCS gave us some craziness and some upsets, and Week 11 has now positioned itself to be put up or shut up Saturday, and we're here to break it all down this week. So let's jump into some of the key storylines this week heading into Week 11 as we go into our 4-minute offense. Two teams were able to punch their ticket already to the FCS playoffs. Both North Dakota State and Colgate were able to clinch their auto bid last weekend due to their winning of the Missouri Valley Conference and Patriot League respectively. The Bison, ranked #1 from start to finish, look to have a highway with no exits that goes from Fargo to Frisco, Texas, as they look as strong as they have in recent years. Colgate has been one of the most fascinating stories to follow this season in the subdivision. The Raiders, led by head coach Dan Hunt, has 5 shutouts this season and has only given up 2.6 points a game. What they've done so far this year is approaching record status. Colgate tied the number of shutouts in an FCS season with 5, which was set back in 1978 by South Carolina State. Now, the Raiders have only allowed 1 touchdown in its last 47 quarters, dating back to October 21st, 2017. It'll be interesting to see come playoff time where they are seeded, because if they don't get one of the top 8 seeds and a first-round bye, it will be one of the biggest crimes in FCS playoffs history, in my opinion. And speaking of the FCS playoffs, one team seems to have positioned themselves nicely to get an at-large bid by simply losing 2 games, and that's the North Carolina A&T Aggies. Now, they didn't want to lose those 2 games, especially coming off in the historic undefeated season, but since it happened, they're theoretically out of the Celebration Bowl hunt, which now puts them in play for an at-large bid in the FCS playoffs. How are they in position with 2 losses, you say? Well, when you look at their resume, it's still quite impressive on paper. The 7-2 Aggies have 2 huge wins against East Carolina and Jacksonville State. That's an FBS win and a potentially Ohio Valley Conference champion victory as well. Plus, A&T still has 2 games left on the schedule in which they'll be more than likely favored in, which could give them 9 victories on the season. And to put the cherry on top, A&T is also ranked 15th in the stats poll and in the AFCA coaches poll as well. All 3 are significant benchmarks for the reigning Black College National Champions and will more than likely earn them a spot in the postseason. If this happens, then they get an opportunity to once again prove their worth on the national FCS scale by trying to become the first MEAC or SWAC school to advance in the playoffs since Florida A&M did it back in 1999, and the first to win an FCS national championship since those same Florida A&M Rattlers did it back in 1978 in the very first FCS title game against the UMass Minutemen. As the FCS season is starting to wind down, we got to give some coaches a little bit of props for the job well done so far this season. I chose 3 unique coaches for their success in unique situations: South Carolina State's Buddy Pugh, Indiana State's Kurt Mallory, and Stetson's Roger Hughes. All 3 teams were picked to finish, if not at the bottom or near at least the bottom in their respective conference, and that hasn't been the case at all this season. Pugh, the longtime legendary Bulldogs head coach, is said to be in his last season, but nothing is official yet, and he's got a team full of true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and sophomores playing extremely well in 3-5 on the season, 3-2 in MEAC play. Coach Mallory's Sycamores were winless last year, and now they find themselves with an outside chance at making the playoffs, as they are currently 5th in the Missouri Valley Conference standings at 3-3, 5-4 overall, winners of 3 straight games, and literally no one thought the Stetson Hatters would be anywhere close to 7 wins in 2018, but here we are. And if they get some help, Coach Hughes' squad could find themselves going to the playoffs as the Pioneer League champions. Either way, finishing with a winning record, the first since bringing back football in 2013, is a huge accomplishment. Could we possibly have a new FCS football conference on the horizon? Well, there's definitely a strong possibility. Recently, Dixie State, which competes in football at the Division II level but Division I at the basketball level in the Western Athletic Conference, conducted a feasibility study to move their football program from Division II up to Division I FCS if the WAC, which hasn't sponsored football since 2012, would consider sponsoring FCS football, which they are seriously considering in doing so. What makes this both interesting and exciting is that they have a lot of teams already in the conference that either have football like Dixie State or are starting to look at football like Utah Valley University, and programs that have at least approached the idea of starting football like University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, Chicago State, and Grand Canyon University. Now, they'll need 6 teams to make a football conference, which is definitely possible. One school of thought is that they would poach a few teams from the Big Sky Conference, like perhaps Cal Poly, Sacramento State, or even UC Davis. Or you can look at another Division II program like Tarleton State down in Texas that's looking to make the jump from Division II to Division I athletics, and the WAC could be a potential landing spot for that to happen. You also have the possibility of teams that have had football before that are looking to reboot their programs like UT Arlington or Wichita State. Now, that got me to thinking about what could a potential WAC FCS conference look like. So I've compiled a 10-team Western Athletic Conference with East and West divisions. And as you can see, this could work with teams that are currently in the conference like Dixie State, Utah Valley, University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, Chicago State, Grand Canyon, Cal Baptist, and Seattle University. Now, Cal Baptist and Seattle University haven't discussed starting football, but with those two being private universities, they don't have a lot of the same budgetary constraints as public schools do, and the same with Grand Canyon. If you look at the list, you see programs like Little Rock, Wichita State, and even Wisconsin Green Bay, all of which have spoken about starting or, in the Shockers case, rebooting their programs as recently as this season. This will be an exciting thing for the FCS as it further expands the amount of football opportunities for programs and adds another Western footprint in the football landscape. So let's hope the WAC and all of these programs, as well as others, can make this a reality.
I think the FCS gives a student athlete a chance to really develop in the classroom and on the field. And I don't think there's anything that gets in the way of the development of the student athlete. You know, whereas in sometimes other conferences, other levels of play, I think there's some things that could sway a student athlete in a wrong direction here or there. But I think at the FCS level, I think it's all about the student athlete. I think it's all about his development in the classroom and also on the playing field. And it really it keeps your values and your goals right in front of you. And I think there's less things that are going to take you away from those things.
As we start to preview some games on the Week 11 schedule, let's start by taking a look at a few that should be on upset alert, and we'll start in South Dakota as the Coyotes play host to Western Illinois. The Leathernecks are on a 3-game winning streak and have positioned themselves to make the FCS playoffs if they are able to win out. It's easier said than done as they have South Dakota and Indiana State left on the schedule. Despite their subpar record, the Coyotes still have one of the best players in the conference in quarterback Austin Simmons. Now, any additional opportunities with the football, they are likely to put it in the end zone. So it'll be key for Western Illinois to avoid turning the ball over and giving them a short field to work with. The issue I have with South Dakota is on the defensive side. They have had issues in stopping the run all season long, giving up 5 yards a carry and over 219 yards a game. I foresee the Leathernecks tailbacks Steve McShane and Max Norris to have a field day in this one, as Western Illinois will avoid the upset. In a situation where one loss could become 2, the Florida A&M Rattlers will try to get back on a winning track as they host South Carolina State. Now, for the Bulldogs in this ball game, they have been one of the more consistent teams in the conference in what they do on both sides of the ball. I've been impressed with quarterback Tyrese Nick and how he's making progress each and every game, making the throws that they are asking him to make in his offense. The defense of the Bulldogs has been stellar, especially within the front seven, and they'll face a tough test as FAMU's offensive line is equally as talented. Now, the Rattlers blew an opportunity to wrap up the conference and a berth to the Celebration Bowl last week in a loss to Howard, but they still control their own destiny. Now, what has to happen in this one is that quarterback Ryan Stanley and the receivers have to be on the same page throughout the game. Although FAMU can run the ball, South Carolina State does a great job in defending it, so initial success will have to come in the passing game. I can see this one being a low-scoring contest, but I like Florida A&M to win it. Their offense is like Howard's offense in the sense that they have explosive playmakers across the board and are able to ring that cash register up pretty quickly. Big game for McNeese State as they travel to Northwestern State to battle the Demons. Now, hopefully for the Cowboys, their offense will decide to join the rest of the team in this crucial matchup. McNeese is on the verge of missing the playoffs if they can't end on a high note. Defensively, They are solid in all three facets, but with the offense not having success and capitalizing on these added possessions, they're ending up losing winnable games. The Demons pose a unique challenge because they have legit weapons on the perimeter, and the passing game, it's very relentless. Their main issue has been turnovers and a defense that's still young and trying to find some level of consistency. I truly can see this one going either way because of what both teams are good at and where they are weakest, but I trust the stronger defense in this matchup and pick the Cowboys to get the win. In the Ohio Valley Conference, Southeast Missouri State is on upset alert this week as they take on Murray State. Now, the Redhawks own the tiebreaker for the conference title over Jacksonville State after beating them a few weeks ago and can't afford to slip up as they make their run to the playoffs. Murray State was in the conversation a few weeks ago prior to their matchup with the Gamecocks. They came into that game winners of 4 straight and was second in the OVC. Now, they got blown out there and have lost 2 straight games. What gives them a chance in this one is their ability to get to the quarterback. What doesn't give them a shot is how well balanced and disciplined the Redhawks are on both sides of the ball, and balance and discipline will win out every time. I like SEMO. Talk about a must-win game for both teams as Rhode Island and James Madison meet up. Ironically, both teams need to continue to win to keep their playoff hopes alive. It's weird to say that about James Madison, but this game is on upset alert because if you look at it on paper and prestige, James Madison should be the clear-cut favorite, but as we all know, things in the FCS and the CAA this season have been really crazy and nothing is certain or guaranteed. For Rhodey to win this game, they'll need to be able to sustain drives against one of the better defenses in the CAA and maximize those opportunities with points. For JMU to avoid the upset, they can't turn the ball over. They've not looked solid in the passing game all season long. They can run the ball, but it's been the passing inconsistency that has doomed them during their losses. I think we're in for a shock here. I like Rhode Island in this ball game. Quarterback Jawan Lawson was a difference maker last week in his first game back after missing the previous 4 due to injury, and I know he threw a pick 6, but the fact that the passing game brought back the element of the big plays of this offense is enough for me to see the Rams keeping this one close, allowing him to be the hero in the end. I think he outplays JMU en route to a monumental upset.
Man, it's that old thing, perseverance, consistency, hard work. My goal is to put the same work into, my businesses, my family that I put into football, and I've been running with that mantra since I got married back in '97, that if I'm going to have a successful marriage, I got to, the same hard work and same consistency and discipline I had on the football field, I got to put in my marriage and with my kids and with my businesses and all that. So it teaches you a lot, man. How to deal with your fellow man and not look at his color, but look at what he can do for the overall good of what you're trying to accomplish. So sports to me in general is just an incredible deal when you talk about football specifically because of the closeness of guys. I just believe it's an amazing sport.
And let's continue with some game previews this week. And we have a big one in the Pioneer League as the Davidson Wildcats meet up with the San Diego Toreros. This one has a chance to be a high-scoring affair as the Wildcats' rushing offense is one of the best in the nation. However, the Toreros come in with maybe just a little something to play for as they can wrap up the Pioneer League and subsequently the auto bid to the FCS playoffs. And will look to be a potential down year for San Diego. They haven't missed a beat all season long, and I don't think they'll ease up now. Look for them to defeat Davidson. Over in the Patriot League, Bucknell heads to Cooper Field to take on the Georgetown Hoyas. After a solid start, it's been all downhill for the Bison, loses of 4 straight games, and it's been the defensive side of the ball that's been a bit of a disappointment for head coach Joe Susan. On the Hoyas side, this has been a bit of a surprisingly good season for Georgetown. They only have 1 loss in conference against Colgate, and they have a chance to even their record to 5-5 on the season. Defense and special teams has been the hallmark for the Hoyas, but they've started to find some offense this season as well with new offensive coordinator Rob Spence. Look for them to get to 500 on the season this week as they'll knock off Bucknell. Mercer and Chattanooga meet up in the SoCon Tilt. Now the Mocs still have hopes of making the playoffs this season as they sit at 6-3 on the year. They are 4-3 in conference play and face a challenge this week from the Bears, whose offense is a run-heavy spread attack that puts a lot of strain on your front 7. The Bears have been a bit up and down this year as a football team. They are 4-5 on the season and right behind the Mocs in the SoCon standings. Now Mercer is aiming for a winning season and they need 2 more victories to accomplish that goal. I don't think that'll happen as the Mocs offense will do a great job of making this game a track meet en route to a victory. Fresh off of an upset win over FAMU last week, the Howard Bison traveled to Norfolk State to take on the Spartans. And I've been impressed with the Bison defense this season, especially in the secondary. They can match up across the board, they can cover well, and they're solid in run support. It'll be the linebacking core this week that'll need to stand out against the Spartans, as their quarterback, Jawan Carter, does a solid job of moving within the pocket and finding options downfield in the short to intermediate area. The Spartans offense hasn't truly taken off like head coach Latrell Scott would have liked, but they do play really good defense, and that'll give them a chance against the Bison. I just don't know how long you can keep this go-go offense out of the end zone, especially when Howard has an explosive threat in the backfield and running back Dedrick Parson. I like Howard to go on the road and get the win. The Portland State Vikings have been a surprise in the Big Sky Conference this year, finding themselves at 3-3, right in the middle of the pack of the conference, and 4-5 overall. They face North Dakota, who may have seen their playoff hopes go up in flames as they've lost 2 straight games. This is an intriguing matchup because the Vikings, since the Montana game in which they won, they've been very solid on defense, and their offensive line has hit its stride as they're starting to have a lot of successful drives and sustained drives on the football field. North Dakota has to find a way to get back its mojo of being bullies up front on both sides of the ball, and that starts with the offensive line having to play big once again in this game. I think we'll see the Fighting Hawks show some fight, right the ship, and win in a close game against Portland State. I believe the Grambling State Alabama A&M game will be one of the better games of the weekend. The Tigers have won 2 straight games and are in spoiler mode as they look to derail teams in the Western Division's hopes for a SWAC championship game appearance. Defensively, they're starting to look like Grambling again, led by linebacker Darius Christmas. The challenge in this game is that they are facing, in my opinion, the best quarterback in the SWAC, and sophomore Kill Glass in that Bulldogs passing attack. Now, where A&M has gotten better this season is from a consistency standpoint. Both their offense and their defense have shown up together on game day, and they find themselves second in the SWAC East with a 5-4 record. Can the Bulldogs' pressure get home like it did last week against Arkansas Pine Bluff? I believe it can, and it will. I like A&M. I travel across the country interviewing coaches, breaking down game and film, and when you come to the MEAC, one thing that's interesting about the MEAC, I think is being vastly underrated across the nation, is how great the coaching is here in the conference from top to bottom. And I can go on and on, listen to things or reasons why the MEAC is the cradle of coaches, but why not hear from the coaches themselves?
Your teams always are mentally tough. Situational football is key with you guys. Is that one of your pillars of success in building the program, and how important is that element to have as a football team?
It's very important. I mean, mental toughness is an ingredient in life, you know, more so than football. We try to put our kids in stressful situations in the classroom, on the football field, in practice situations, in winter conditioning, so that when they do hit adversity, you know, they can manage. Our teams have fortunately always been one of the least penalized teams in each league that we've been in, is because just the way that we structure practice. You know, if it's 3rd and 1 and we're going to jump off sides, or we're going to get a penalty to keep the opposing team with the ball, then we're not very mentally tough. But we try to put our guys in as many adverse situations as we possibly can, because, you know, today is a kind of microwave society. It's a we want results right now generation, and we have to try to create as much adversity as we possibly can, so that when adversity does hit, we don't wilt.
Coach, we're a long-time assistant here, and many head coaching opportunities came about, but you didn't choose them. You chose this one. What made Bethune-Cookman the most ideal spot for you?
I think first and foremost the people. And, you know, that's the same spiel that I give kids when I talk to them. You don't want to go to a university, you don't want to choose a school because of the buildings. You want to choose a university, you know, based on the people that are in those buildings. And I think here, it's a family atmosphere. Not saying everyone gets along all the time, but it's a true family atmosphere. I think you feel the warmth, you feel the love on this campus when you come here. And it was just something that I felt like I wanted to continue. I wanted to continue to build young men, you know, in a place like this. And it's only 3 hours from my hometown, so that made it, you know, a little bit more attractive. And, you know, just being in a place that I was familiar with. And I had been here for 5 years, and we were successful, and I knew we had good players left around here. I knew it was good people surrounding this athletic department.
You've coached everywhere, and you've always been known as a great teacher, both positionally, schematically. How important is that to coaching, to you as a coach, and also do you feel as though that's a lost art of coaching?
You know, we talk about a development of a player or of a person and taking the whole A to Z approach. And, you know, basic fundamentals, understanding the grasp of why you're asking them to do certain things, because we always want to go, you know, we want to go right to the finished product, the end product. But along the way, a base, sound, fundamental way about coaching and teaching and explaining it is something critical to the success of the young man that you're coaching. And so if you take that kind of an A to Z approach, you know, sometimes we get impatient. That's probably one of my weakest points that I need to work on is patience, but at the same time you understand that it's critical to a success. So if it's an A, B, C, D approach and it's not going as fast as we want it to, we're prone, our human nature is prone to go A, B, L, M, N, O. You got to go back to the fundamentals again. And I think if you spend time on that and showing the player why and the importance of hand placement, of a stance, of communication, that later on, you know, his opportunities will be successful because you spent the dedicated amount of time needed to do that.
Well, one thing, Delaware State is a school on the rise, where a lot of schools' enrollment, especially HBCUs, enrollment has dropped. Delaware State has increased 25%. Okay, it's centrally located. You can get to Philly, DC, Maryland, Virginia, New York, Connecticut. You get to places really, really quick. We're one of the few HBCUs that's in the capital of a state. We're right across the street from a mall. It's in walking distance to all your major restaurants and Chick-fil-A's and things like that. So we have something special here in Dover. I call it a gold mine. I call it a hidden gem. I think academically, we rank just like with any other school. You know, we're constantly building new buildings. We have a new dorm that's being built right now. Our new administration believes in our student body, believes in our faculty, and they definitely believe, and they're supporting our athletics. We have so many new pieces of the puzzle that just got here at Delaware State, meaning a new president, a provost, a CFO, an athletic director, a head football coach, a men's head basketball coach, a women's head basketball coach. All of these hires have just happened within the last 8 months. So you come to Delaware State with something new, revived, new ideas, and it gives you an opportunity to put your own spin on it. You come to a program like ours that's getting off the ground, and guess what? You can tell your kids one day, hey, I was there when I was a part of the turnaround. I was a part of something great. When I got to Delaware State, they had won the MEAC in '85, didn't win in '86. '87, we won it again. I was here, '87, '88, '89. So I was saying to myself, hey, they won in '85. That was one time, the first time ever. I want to make sure my class, we win more than one. We ended up winning 87, 88, 89, and 91.
Program that I watched from afar that I was very fond of was the fact that you guys don't rebuild, you reload. How are you able to maintain that level of consistency in a tough landscape of college football?
Well, have you been to South Carolina State on a Saturday? You see the kind of crowds we have, because if you don't play good, then they'll all be out in the parking lot tailgating. And the last thing you want to do is have like that many people outside not wanting to come in. So, you know, we feel good about the fact that we've got to always be on top of our game in every way. You know, we work our butts off to coach our kids up and make sure we show some signs of consistency that way. You know, the sense of urgency you got to have to make yourself always know that you got to be competitive, you know, is the thing that drives us in a way that we know we can always be fairly decent.
Well, I think for me, it's in a great area. You know, there's we drew a 2.5-hour radius around our school. There's just a ton of talented high school football players. So anytime I would ever evaluate a job, you know, I feel like you got to go somewhere where there's a chance to recruit good high school players, and I think we have that at Savannah State.
And you would. Now we get into the previews of some of the bigger games on the schedule this week in the FCS, and we have a critical one in the NEC that could decide who wins and gets the auto bid to the FCS playoffs as Sacred Heart meets up with Duquesne. The Pioneer season has essentially been set up in threes, 3-game winning streak followed by a 3-game losing streak, and now they come into this matchup winners of 3 straight games. What's been constant in all 6 of their victories has been their ground game. The common theme for their 3 losses, turnovers. In this matchup, we'll find out if they can run the ball against the Dukes. If if they can cover and if they can cover on the back end. Now, Duquesne's offense is explosive, and they have two premier players on that side of the ball, and that's running back A.J. Hines and wide receiver Nahari Crawford. Quarterback Daniel Parr has played well as of late, and the line of scrimmage will be the biggest test for them in this ball game. If the Dukes can win there, they'll win this game. It's going to be a tough one out there in Pittsburgh, but I do see the Dukes being able to have success in the passing game, ultimately taking out the Pioneers. I don't know how Illinois State is still ranked, and it's beyond me, as they are heading to Terre Haute to take on the Sycamores of Indiana State. Now, the Redbirds have lost 3 straight games and are actually a game behind Indiana State in the Missouri Valley Conference standings. A once promising season for the Redbirds has gone off the rails in the last month. Now, their offense has lost its way, and it has struggled to find continuity. The same things cannot be said about the Sycamores, who have found a way to stay afloat despite losing their top tailback, Jaquan Keys, to a career-ending injury. I like Indiana State in this ball game. They still have an outside shot at the playoffs, and I think with the way their offense can score, it'll put a lot more pressure on the Redbirds' offense to match, and I don't think they can. The Princeton Tigers and Yale Bulldogs meet up in an Ivy League matchup, as the Tigers are coming off of a big-time win in a game of the week last week against Dartmouth. It wasn't the usual high-flying offense that we're used to seeing from Princeton. It was their defense being the reason why they knocked off the Big Green. Against Yale, we'll see another good point-of-attack matchup, as the Bulldogs' offensive line is outstanding. Yale got great play last week from quarterback Griffin O'Connor, who went 30 out of 38 for 436 yards, 4 touchdowns. Needless to say, something along this line of effort will be greatly appreciated if you're Bulldogs head coach Tony Reno. Defensively is where you have questions about Yale in this ball game. Can they match up on the perimeter against Princeton? This is where it'll get dicey for them. I like the Tigers to move on to a perfect 9-0 on the season. What a big game in the CAA this week between Towson and Elon. The Tigers are coming off of a loss to Maine, in which they struggled to stop the run. Well, they'll get a chance to right some wrongs this week, as the Phoenix are one of the top rushing teams in the conference. Towson, in their 2-game losing streak, has also started to turn the ball over, and that clearly has to get cleaned up pretty quickly, as losing possessions to Elon is a losing proposition. The Phoenix got great play last week from its defense, including a Warren Messer pick 6 that helped defeat the Rhode Island Rams. They also got a great day from their freshman tailback Jalen Thomas, who ran for 222 yards on the day. The question for the Phoenix will be, how often will they be able to get stops against Towson? Third down defense is going to be huge in this ball game, and they've been able to find a way all season long, and this will be another stiff test. I actually think they're battle tested enough to get the job done. I like Elon to win this game. Staying in the CAA, the Delaware Blue Hens traveled to Long Island to take on the Stony Brook Seawolves. Delaware narrowly escaped against Albany last week, and just when you thought their passing game had turned a corner, it was back to being inconsistently pedestrian. So that sets the table for this game being all about run game and defense, as the Stony Brook Seawolves have the same issues with their passing game as well. And if you love offensive line and point of attack play, then this game will be for you. This is a best versus best, strength versus strength game in the trenches, with a lot on the line, as Stony Brook still has hopes for the playoffs and wants to strengthen its case for an at-large bid. Both teams are the same and they play the same game, but I will give the edge to Stony Brook in this one. Coming off of a bye, that extra week of preparation, will give them just enough to eke past the Blue Hens. In what is essentially the Big South Conference title game, Kennesaw State travels to the Jersey Shore to take on the Monmouth Hawks. In addition to having one of the most explosive offenses in the FCS, the Owls also have a stellar defense. We'll learn a lot about the Owls' secondary in this game, as they'll be facing 2 excellent targets in wide receiver Reggie White Jr. and a tight end in Jake Powell that's a solid player over the middle of the field. We know they can stop the run, but can they consistently match up on the outside? For Monmouth, we know they can pass, but can they consistently protect quarterback Kenji Bahar, as the Owls do a great job of playing on the opposite side of the line of scrimmage. Defensively, it's about playing assignment sound and disciplined football versus the option of Kennesaw. Now, the Hawks quietly have gotten significantly better defensively each and every game since their Princeton blowout, but I do think in this matchup, because of its uniqueness and the offense that they're facing, it'll prove to be a tough match to slow down. I like Kennesaw to win this game in a close one. This weekend, I will be in Baltimore as Morgan State takes on Delaware State. I will be the color analyst on the ESPN3 broadcast, and this should be a very good game, as you have an improving Delaware State Hornets team led by head coach Rod Milstead in his first year, and Morgan State that has one of the best defenses and rushing attacks in the MEAC. So we'll see which one will have the advantage this week. Again, you can check it out on ESPN3 and the Watch ESPN app. And if you're locally in Baltimore, turn to MeTV, the MeTV network, CBS 21 in Harrisburg, PA, and Sportstime Ohio as well.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
Now it's time for our Stats FCS Game of the Week preview, and this week it's a Big Sky matchup between UC Davis and Eastern Washington. Let's take a look at some coaching points for both teams in this ball game, starting with UC Davis. It'll be important offensively for the Aggies to continue to keep the pressure of the Eagles guessing. I believe UC Davis already does a great job of this with their quick screen game and quick hitters in a running game. That'll be the key, and they'll have to be on point in this matchup as they'll see a ton of pressure from Eastern Washington. Defensively, they can't lose sight of the Eagles' ground game. Quietly, Eastern Washington can run the heck out of the football, and you can't allow yourself to get caught up in worrying about the passing game because they can and will gas you on the ground. Also, staying on that side of the ball, it's about push versus pressure. You just can't fly upfield and rush past quarterback Eric Barrier. He's good enough to step up and out the pocket and pick up yards on the ground. The ends have to make sure to collapse the pocket around him and let that pressure come from within that tackle-to-tackle box. So it'll be key for the Aggies to not allow Barrier to extend drives with his legs. Moving over to the Eagles in this ball game, defensively they have to force quarterback Jake Mayer to make quicker than usual decisions with the football. You can make that happen by keeping the pressure on high, forcing him to get rid of the football quickly, which will 9 times out of 10 be a short pass, which then allows you as a defense to rally up, make the stop, and get off the field. You can't give him time in the pocket with these receiving options. And in that same regard, UC Davis forces you to make plays consistently in space on defense. They have excellent wideouts and running backs that do a lot of damage on the perimeter. If you can't make plays defensively in space on a consistent basis, you will struggle. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, it's about playing well situationally. That's third down offense, 4-minute offense to close out the half inside the red zone. If they can play well situationally, then yes, the Eastern Washington Eagles have a chance of knocking off the Aggies. Looking at some X factors in this ball game, and UC Davis's wide receiver Jared Harrell has to be ready to see increased targets come his way, and I'm pretty sure the Eagles will try to do their part to take Keelan Doss out of the game. Harrell is pretty good in his own right, and in a game of this magnitude, he has an opportunity to become a household name. For Eastern Washington, I look at the offensive line having to have the biggest impact. UC Davis does a great job in applying pressure and is solid versus the run. And a dangerous Eagles team is a well-balanced one. And when you look at this offensive line and the job they've done so far this season, having another big game against a very good defensive front could yield them a lot of success in this ball game. I like Eastern Washington in this one. Quarterback Eric Barrier has done a solid job keeping this offense on pace since Gage Gubru went down with an injury for the season, and I'm a fan of how he's been able to manage the game, take what the defense gives him, but also showing that he can take over a game if need be. So look for his play to be the biggest story coming out of Cheney, Washington after this one. So that's it for this week's episode of the FCS Kickoff. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and don't forget to check out, subscribe, and leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, the Football Game Plan Podcast, where you can find the FCS Opening Drive Podcast. And also check out, subscribe, and become a fan and share the Football Game Plan Network located at youtube.com/footballgameplan.